This is a Midwest Minute with Matt. Simple concussion conversations that just make sense. Before we get started, just a quick note. This podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not medical advice and does not replace evaluation or treatment from a qualified healthcare provider. Listening to this podcast does not establish a provider-patient relationship. Every brain injury is unique, and what we discuss may not directly apply to your situation. If you are experiencing symptoms or have concerns, please seek care from a licensed medical professional. If this is an emergency, call 911 or your local emergency services immediately. Hello and welcome to a Midwest Minute with Matt, simple concussion conversations that just make sense. I am your host, Matt Campbell, and today our episode is called Why Pushing Through Symptoms Usually Backfires. One of the most frustrating parts of concussion recovery is, suddenly, life doesn't necessarily feel normal anymore. The grocery store feels overwhelming, conversations get exhausting, screens feel unbearable, crowds can feel impossible. And the hardest part? Most people around you don't understand why. Today we're going to talk about why everyday life feels so difficult after a concussion and what's actually happening underneath it. After a concussion, the brain has to work harder to do things that once felt automatic or things that we didn't have to think about. The brain uses more energy, it's slower to process information, we have a reduced tolerance for activities and stimulus, and then we're faster to overload. It's not that all of a sudden you forgot how to do things or you became weak. It's that the brain is not functioning as efficiently as it normally does. That's why our busy environments can feel so overwhelming. Places like the grocery store, restaurants, going to school, going to work, going to the gym, being in loud crowds can feel overwhelming to the nervous system because the brain is struggling to process everything. There's too much noise, there's too much movement, there's too many lights going on, there's too many things happening all at the same time. Generally, there's just too much. There's too much for the brain to try to process. As we're going through our day-to-day routines, the brain will use energy. And as the brain starts to burn through the available energy in the energy stores, it will start to prioritize systems. The priority going to the heart and lungs. Once the heart and lungs are working fine, everything else can slowly start to use energy again. Well, the longer we don't feel good, the more we burn that excess energy that we have stored, and it's harder to replace that energy in our body. It's part of the reason why most people that are dealing with concussions, especially in the acute phase, will crave sugar, is that's the easiest way for the body to go through and build our fast-burning energy. So when we start talking about the energy usage, one of the most complex things that the brain does is what we think in our head versus what we say out loud. That link takes multiple steps to get from what we're thinking to what we're saying. When we're healthy, the brain is processing that information very quickly. We're able to carry on without too much overload, and then we can sit down and actually say what we're thinking. After a concussion, the brain doesn't work as efficiently. Things aren't connecting as fast as they normally are. So when you're carrying on conversations or when you're in busy environments and there are too many things all happening, the brain can't process all of that information at the same time. Going back to the grocery store analogy that we brought up, the grocery store goes through and there's a lot of lights, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of movement, the shelves generally all look the same, and we can get what's called supermarket syndrome. It's just that we get dizzy, disoriented, and we lose our balance, we lose coordination or train of thought while we're in the grocery store because there's too many lights, too much noise, too much movement, all happening at the same time. The brain is trying to process more information than it can tolerate at the very beginning. And as we go through our concussion recovery, that tolerance level will move. Concussion recovery is a fine line between doing too much and not enough. The challenge comes from trying to figure out where that fine line sets. If I give somebody 10 things to do for the next 10 days, they may feel 10 different ways afterwards. And that is what makes everything so challenging when it comes to concussion recovery. Why is all of a sudden something I'm doing today that I've been doing all week bothering me where it hasn't given me any problems in the past? And a lot of that boils back down to the energy available at the time you're doing an activity. Again, your brain is just trying to process more information than it can comfortably tolerate right now. When the brain can't tolerate something, it fights back by giving you symptoms. Now, think about why that would translate to conversations becoming more exhausting. Conversations require listening, processing information, filtering out the background noise or the environmental processing. We have to think about the response that we're going to say, and then we have to regulate emotionally what that conversation is bringing up in our system. That's a lot of energy demand all happening at the same time. Now, if I'm in a calm environment and it's a one-on-one conversation, it's easier for me to process that information. But let's say I'm out at a restaurant, or I'm at work, or I'm at my kid's sporting event, or I'm at school, and there are 40 different conversations that are all happening in the room. My brain has to essentially filter out the conversation that you and I are having and block out all of the other excess background noise. What happens a lot of times with concussion patients is the brain is trying to bring in as much stimulus and kind of tolerate as much stimulus as possible, but the body is trying to do everything that it can to bring information into the brain. Essentially, the brain slows down after a concussion. The rest of the body tries to speed it up by bringing it more information. So instead of being able to block out the background conversation, your brain picks up a part of the conversation across the room. It picks up a part of the conversation at the next table. It picks up the conversation you and I are having. And you're getting bits and pieces of information from multiple different sources. Now the brain has to figure out what happened or what information I need to formulate the answer that I need to have. It's why if you've ever been carrying on a conversation with somebody during their own concussion recovery, they may say words that don't fit into a situation, or they may answer a question that you haven't talked about. It's because they heard the question from a table across the room or next to them, and they're trying to answer that question as if you and I had that same conversation. That's a lot of things that the brain has to do when trying to carry on a conversation. And that's why people who are struggling through their own concussion recovery will sit down and say, hey, if I'm having a one-on-one conversation with somebody, I do fine. But as soon as there are too many things going on or I get interrupted in the middle of a conversation, it's hard for me to pick back up where we left off, or it's hard for me to kind of get back into a conversation because now all of a sudden I have to go back through and I have to systematically reduce my load, reduce the environment, block everything out, and I feel mentally drained. That's why people will zone out when there's in conversations, or when there are multiple people talking, they may zone out completely. They may stare off into space, or they may close their eyes, or they may get up and physically walk away from a conversation. And it leaves the person who's not navigating through concussion recovery going, well, what in the heck just happened? We were talking. Why did you just walk away? It can be irritating for the person that's carrying on the conversation who's not navigating concussion recovery, let alone how frustrating it can be for the person who's navigating through their own recovery. That's like, I didn't just leave a conversation, you weren't talking. That leads to the emotional strain, right? It makes people become irritable. So what can happen is after that, people will start avoiding things. If I know something I'm going to do is going to make me feel miserable, it's going to make it so I don't want to do it. And I'm healthy. If I know going into a situation that, hey, when I'm there, I am going to be absolutely miserable, I don't jump at the opportunity to go do that, right? I'm human. I don't want to go do it either. Now imagine if being at work, being at school, going to practice, going out with friends, being at dinner with my family, if those things are making me miserable, the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start to avoid it. I don't go to the grocery store anymore. I don't go out with friends. I don't use my cell phone, or I don't go driving. I avoid the activity because the brain starts to associate those environments with stress, overload, irritability. And when we do that, that creates the anxiety, the fear of symptoms, the loss of confidence of being able to do things. And ultimately, it leads to the isolation that people will go through after a concussion. When I talk with a patient, one of the first things that I'm trying to do is we are trying to establish the fine line between doing too much and not enough. I have to try to get them into as much of their normal routine as I can without overloading their system. It's that fine line. When I have somebody who's isolating from activities, we don't jump back into everything right away going, hey, we got to keep you here and we got to keep doing this. We have to slowly reintegrate back into those activities. If you're somebody who's been avoiding something, it's not a failure. It's a safety or protection mechanism for the body. If I know going into an environment I'm going to be miserable, I'm not going to go, and I'm not dealing with a brain injury. Avoidance may reduce symptoms for the short term, but overall, it shrinks the world and will increase the amount of time it will take you to get back out into the real world. Old school treatment approach for concussions is we used to just put you in a dark room and say good luck. Not only has research proven that that doesn't help, it actually delays recovery because eventually you're going to come back out of that dark room. When you come back out of that dark room, the brain's not used to all of the stimulus that's happening. So now all of a sudden we get really symptomatic again, and it causes us to go back into our dark room. So, what do we do instead of avoiding things or instead of being in those dark rooms or instead of kind of taking ourselves and hiding from everybody? It's not about avoiding life forever. It's about pacing, going through and gradually exposing you to those different things. We're trying to regulate our nervous system, build tolerance slowly over time, and understand that what our current capacity is may not be what it used to be, and it may not be what it is tomorrow. We have to figure out what our capacity is each day, and we have to establish that. One of the easiest ways that we do that is every activity that I'm going to do, I want to do the activity for a short amount of time. I want to take a break, figure out what happened to my symptoms. It can be very frustrating, but if I need to go grocery shopping, I'm going to go into the grocery store knowing that, hey, I have a list. I know what aisles I'm going to, and I'm going to do that. I'm not going to have a full 2 weeks worth of groceries that I want to go get. I've got one item, 1 day's worth of groceries. We're going to go in, we're going to get these two things, and then we're going to come out. And then I get back in my car, and how am I doing? Okay, I'm not dizzy. I'm not nauseous. I'm not irritated. Cool. Now we'll try it again. We'll go back in and get Tuesday's groceries or Wednesday's groceries. It can be really frustrating to people because they sit down and they're like, well, I shouldn't have to do that. Well, it's not a forever modification. It's a short time that we do this, and then over time we can build it back up to where you are. But if each time you're going into the grocery store, you're getting dizzy, nauseous, lightheaded, even thinking about the grocery store is going to make you get symptomatic. Driving past will make you get symptomatic because your brain has associated the grocery store with fear. And when we associate an environment or an activity with fear, the brain will go into a protection mechanism surrounding that environment. If we've already done that and you're trying to figure out how to break through it, that's where graded exposure can come to. If I have patients that are really nervous about going out and going to the grocery store, I will tell them, hey, set a timer on your phone for 3 minutes, go to the grocery store, get a cart, and walk around. When that timer goes off, put your cart away and go back out to the car. We didn't even come for anything. We didn't want to do anything, but we wanted to be in that environment, proving to the brain that, hey, I can do this. And the more you can stack those wins on top of each other, the less likely you are to avoid that activity. The goal isn't to force your brain through the overload. The goal is to rebuild your tolerance gradually over time. If everyday life feels harder after your concussion, you're not imagining it. Your brain is processing the world differently right now. But understand why that's happening can help reduce fear, improve our confidence, and guide recovery moving forward. If this episode helps something click, share it with somebody who needs it. If you're looking for guidance, support, or clarity during your own concussion recovery, you can learn more at mwconcussion.com, or you can follow us on all of our social medias at mwconcussion. If you have a question or something that you want addressed on a podcast episode down the road, or if you want to be a guest on the podcast, feel free to reach out in my DMs. I would love to have you on, love to get a chance to spend a Midwest Minute with Matt. Simple concussion conversations that just make sense.